What's going on, everybody? It's the Elevate Investment team. So after a lot of discussion with my partner, in today's video we're going to do things a little differently. We're going to shift a little bit away from the educational route, talk a little bit about popular things going on in today's market. Now, the two most popular things going on in today's market are probably Bitcoin and the marijuana markets. And given that Bitcoin is a piece of crap, we're going to talk about the marijuana markets today. So just in case you've been living under a rock for the last few years, you should know that the marijuana industry has kind of blown up in popularity and value in the stock market, at least. So here's a 3-year graph of the marijuana companies. You can see they've exploded in growth. Now you have to ask yourself, why are these companies growing so immensely in value? Well, we personally believe that a lot of this growth is fueled by anticipation for future value. If you look at the current valuation of a lot of these companies, the recent growth does not at all justify their market valuation. Here's the income statement of some of the top guys. Here's Afria, Aurora, and Canopy Growth Corporation. As you can see, their income statements are not that attractive. There's nothing really to be excited about. So where is this value coming from? Well, essentially what's really happening is a number of investors, in anticipation of where these companies will be in the future, are getting in now, trying to get in early, trying to squeeze in through this door because they see this industry as becoming immensely popular and valuable in the future. And these corporations have very much benefited from this as well. They've gotten tons of funding and they've been essentially locking up their arsenal so that when marijuana does get legalized, they have the operation ready to fund these projects and become top dog. So in that regard, these companies have been largely focusing on licensing, manufacturing, building their real estate and production facilities. They have spent astronomical amounts of money and investor capital on production facilities with hundreds of thousands of square footage and the capacity to grow hundreds of thousands, if not millions of grams of marijuana. So these companies are essentially growing because of projected future value. And this is very important to consider because why is this industry very attractive? Well, you have to look at it from the economic standpoint and therefore the supply and demand curve. What makes this industry so attractive compared to other startup companies and startup industries is that they already have half the process locked down. What do I mean by that? Well, as you know, when you start a business, you need to do two things. You need to create a product and you need to learn how to supply it efficiently, and then you have to find out if there's a demand for it. Well, we already have the demand locked down. This isn't a new tech product or a new service being provided. Marijuana has been being consumed throughout most of mankind's history, and the consumption of marijuana will be, for the most part, consistent, if not growing. So the demand is already there. All that really needs to happen is for the regulatory environment to pass their bills, and then you're going to see huge amounts of growth and financial performance in these companies, and therefore wealth creation. So from a risk standpoint, this really alleviates risk. This, compared to most businesses, makes this a very attractive industry. If you own a tech company, you're always scared that somebody's going to come around and make your business and your industry obsolete. Technological innovations occur every single day. If you're in the restaurant industry, you fear that a restaurant may come around the corner and provide some creative dishes that will spark attention. So in comparison, the marijuana industry does not have threat of new entrants and is much less subject to technological disruption. There's no real spark of innovation that can change the business model of these companies. To the contrary, what's actually being sparked is a lot of joints. And another thing I want to talk about was the shift in societal views toward marijuana consumption. In the last few decades, I've really witnessed the public's perception around marijuana shifting a lot. You can call this a very seismic shift, and it has to do a lot with progressive views contributing to this. Because you have to understand, for the longest time, marijuana consumption had a very negative stigma to it. If you were somebody that smoked marijuana or pot, you were considered a junkie, a low life, and probably a criminal. Well, this is very much not the case anymore. Many people have spoken out against this. For the most part now, these negative stigmas are associated with the older demographic who have much more conservative and old school views. Newer generations, millennials included, are looking at it from a much different angle. And because of this shift in views, this has also led to status quo and establishment institutions talking in a very positive light towards marijuana consumption. These so-called status quo or establishment institutions are things like in the political spectrum. You have politicians like Justin Trudeau or Kevin O'Leary and Bernie Sanders speaking about the benefits of marijuana. In regards to healthcare institutions, you have medical experts discussing the possibility of implementing medical marijuana and speaking about its benefits. You have lawmakers and crime experts who are now referencing Portugal, Uruguay, and Netherlands as countries who have experienced benefits, societal benefits, due to decreasing drug laws. And these countries have seen large drops in their crime rates as an example of this. So maybe people are starting to think that they could implement that here as well in their own countries. You have the government who talks about tax revenue and the employment benefits which contribute to the economy. And lastly, you have affluential business people and business institutions who talk about the financial aspect of that, the money-making opportunities, and the investment markets that could grow and prosper with this as well. In Canada, for example, example, we saw Bill C-45 that was passed by the House of Commons, which legalized recreational marijuana consumption. In the US, it's still a little tricky. It's an issue that's covered state by state, and therefore it varies state by state. And we want to mention some conclusions we've made from observing the markets over the years. One is that these markets are very sensitive to news. I can't even count the amount of times just a bad public article has been pushed out into the media that has led to a movement in price in the marijuana markets. Another thing you have to understand about the marijuana markets is there is almost zero institutional investment. Institutional investment just means institutions from the big funds and pension plans and insurance companies who manage other people's money. Institutional investment for the most part implies stability in the financial markets because they tend to have long-term visions, and because they have a lot of money, they can move in and out of positions very quickly. Whereas retail investors who often only invest a couple of $1,000s can move their money around quickly and who react a lot quicker and are a lot more volatile in their reactions to the things going on in the markets. These are considered regular Joe Schmoes. So because there's almost zero institutional investment, this also contributes to the idea of why marijuana markets are so volatile. And another thing we've largely observed is there are probably two big parties in this marijuana market right now, and both these parties have opposing views. The first group are volatility traders or swing traders. These are very technical guys. For the most part, they're only in the market because of the price volatility. They don't really care too much about what's going on and what's shaping in the environment. They don't have a long-term outlook, and they're looking just to profit off short-term price swings. However, the second party, and probably the more interesting party, this is the party that we're involved in as well, are the investors who have a long-term outlook. These guys believe in the idea of legalizing marijuana. They see greater rewards in holding a long-term stance. Of course, these guys have accepted, or they really should, that this market is volatile. However, they also believe that it'll work itself out. We have seen big swings up and down almost every single day, and never have my partner or I looked and said maybe it's time to sell. The reason for this is because we believe in the long-term idea. However, there has been interest by institutional investment in marijuana companies. For example, Constellation Brands, who is an international producer of beer, wine, and spirits, recently, not too long ago, just bought a 10% stake in Canopy Growth Corp. They're probably one of the first few big institutions that have done this. On top of that, there has been interest by BMO and rumors that BMO would be interested in buying shares of these marijuana companies through their mutual fund and managed funds. And I just wanted to pass some final words on to you guys as a conclusion. We see a lot of attraction in the industry, especially because marijuana is expected to be legalized in 2018 and 2019 in Canada. We believe that the societal benefits that Canada experiences from this, as I mentioned, economic and taxation, etc., will serve as a benchmark for other countries as a legalization process undergoes globally. On top of that, the younger generations for the most part are a lot more in tune with modern day science regarding marijuana. As these younger generations or millennials continue to grow up, they're going to have a bigger foothold in society and more of a stance in decision making. And another thing I wanted to mention is that we personally own shares in both Aurora, Afria, and as well as Canopy Growth Corp. However, we don't necessarily recommend holding stocks in only these three corporations. Although for the long time we have identified these three as three big leaders, we recommend for the untrained or passive investor to just buy a marijuana ETF, one that reflects a basket of these companies. Why do we recommend this? Well, just because this industry will succeed, it doesn't mean every single company will succeed. As this story continues to unravel, you can really reap the benefits of this by holding an index that represents the basket of marijuana companies. By doing this, you can ride the gains, and you can alleviate risk by not being exposed to only a single or few companies. One marijuana ETF we also hold, we think is a leader in this regard, is the Horizons Medical Life Marijuana ETF. Its ticker is HMMJ.TO. This is the first video in what we're going to consider to be a marijuana series, where we go over many aspects of the market. This was video 1, where we just wanted to give a brief market overview. In next week's topic, we're going to give a bit of a more quantitative and financial data analysis video, where we're going to go over global consumption of marijuana by country, as well as looking at what the biggest countries are that smoke marijuana per capita basis when looking at a population. So if you're interested in this, please give us a comment or some feedback. After that video, we're going to go over a specific company analysis, where we're going to go over why certain companies are more attractive than others. And if you want to listen to those as well, please stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening, guys, and I hope you guys have a good day. Take care.